Okay, welcome to the first checkpoint of our Climathon. The goal today is to design solution on the 5 challenges of the Climathon, and on this first checkpoint, we're gonna define a little bit the basic idea we want to develop and foster on during the whole Climathon. But before doing that, we want to give some information and also some useful insights on some of the topics and that we are going to address on the Climathon. And for that, I'll give the floor to Dr. Gabriela Fernandez and Carlo Maione that will give us one of the first expert workshop that we are gonna perform during the Climathon. So the floor is yours, Dr. Gabriela and Carol, for your talk.
Thank you. I will now be sharing my screen. Let's see why it's, there we are. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will be presenting the environmental education and its implications on marine litter pollution management. So we hope that these, let's say, different activities could be inspiring for your projects for Climathon. I am Dr. Gabriela Fernandez. I'm an adjunct faculty in the Department of Geography at San Diego State University. My research focuses on the concept of urban metabolism in underrepresented communities, in order to localize the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in Southern California and the Baja California, Mexico region. Carol, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, also we can all see the slide changing. Can you just make sure? Okay, perfect, thank you. And I'm Carol, I'm a PhD candidate in industrial engineering at the Polytechnic University of Milan and collaborate with Metabolism of Cities Living Lab, San Diego State University. My doctoral research focus on plastic monitoring, material flow analysis, and dynamic modeling of plastic accumulation in water systems, and the role of technology towards a circular economy. My other research interests include the study of plastic pollution in Africa with the impact from tourism on local communities, and also the role of citizen science in water quality analysis. Next. Okay. So for what, wasn't there another slide here? No. Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. For what concern today's topic, we're going to focus on mismanaged plastic waste, and in particular, mismanaged plastic waste start on land and end up in the ocean. So you can imagine the relevance of studying what happened in coastal cities and coastal countries and how much they contribute to plastic pollution. As you can see on the right side of the slide, as more as we consume plastic, and mainly in a linear consumption model, this plastic is ending up in the environment, and eventually it's reaching the ocean through by transport, by wind, river, waterways, and also through the direct littering. And some of this plastic also originate in the sea. Next. Okay, these are some photos of example of mismanaged plastic waste as an impact of the waste management sector. And this is especially problematic when we talk about coastal cities and mismanagement from the waste management sector is impacting directly the flow of plastic going into our oceans. Next. But also once plastic enters the ocean, it continues to circulate and is transported by ocean currents, and so you can really see how the dislocated effect of like use and consumption of plastic pollution can also like be noticed and tracked, which is also like one of the topics that we would like you to address today. Next. Okay, here I'm going to present some example of a previous like beach cleanup project that was held in Zanzibar, Tanzania in 2018. And during this cleanup, we analyzed mostly plastic coming from the tourism sectors. And as you can see, the most common plastic items found were PET water bottles first, food wrapping, plastic bags, even though like plastic bags have been banned like 12 years earlier in Zanzibar, but they were still present, and in the oceans. We found tablewares, including cutlery, plastic cups, straw, fishing gears, and then like personal items. Next. So we tried to look at the different like drivers of marine pollution, and as mentioned before, tourism was a major one. But it's not just tourism, it was also like the lack of like very regulation for the tourism sectors. And in particular, the waste management service does not include like plastic or waste more in general coming from the tourism sector. And because of this, most of the plastic like ended up as like a leakage into the environment as an effect of like infrastructure efficiency. In addition to that, we have also a low recycling rate, and also like marine littering, which was a major like input of plastics into the ocean, as well as like social norms and public awareness. Next. So we tried to look at the different like consumer behavior and understand how much like tourism was perceived as a sector contributing to waste and plastic generation specifically. And during interviews, we interviewed people from both like the waste management sector and like tourism sector. And we understand that they, even though like tourism was mainly like associated with like income and like, you know, bringing like flows of like tourists into the island, they could also like recognize that tourism was like the high tourism season was the season in which they could track the most waste and most plastics. So they said like that during tourism season, they could, the amount of waste generated was 2 times more than it was during the low tourism season. They said they also noticed like different types of like waste being tracked during high tourism season, such as like the plastic bottles, which was also confirmed by our observations. But they said like in general, like tourism were respectful of the environment. It was most like the lack of like infrastructure on tourism sites that was contributing to like plastic ending up into the ocean. But in some cases, they also noticed like this plastic pollution happening directly on the sea, like for instance, during like boat expedition and the lack of like, you know, waste collecting facilities like on those very expeditions. Next. So we try to address the different consumer behavior and understand which behavior, what could affect, you know, like polluters. And there's like 5 categories of factors that we look at. First, like social cultural factors, such as social norms, observation of peer behavior, and also like beliefs, which were like contributing to a higher presence of plastics in the environment. Second, economic factors such as convenience of plastics over other materials. So like the fact that like people kept like demanding for plastics, and this means like also an increased generation of waste. The lack of incentive, tax, and personal gain for them like to shift from plastic to different purchasing behavior and different disposal behavior. Third, environmental factors such as the lack of perception of the risk and care for the environment, which is especially common in tourism areas where people do not feel like the belonging and do not like recognize identity with the place. Regulatory factors such as the lack of environmental policies, the perpetuation of like informality and uncontrolled dumping, and lastly, informational and educational factors such as low public awareness, the lack of environmental education program and campaign, and low engagement in activism and cleanup. Next. So you can see here are some example of photos of consumer behavior in like tourism spots. Next. And so we try to understand which of these factors we could tackle. Then, of course, I would like also you to, I would like to invite you to think of like these factors and how you can address them during your project today. And we think through education, through art, looking at technology or like data and the role of industry, you could like look at how to change the social cultural factors in order to inspire pro-environmental behavior, or like environmental factors and making like people like more closer to the problem and to the environment, and also like information and education factors, which speaks per se. Next. So in particular, education can drive change, both like talking about like individual change. So through education, consumer can make informed decisions, for instance, and also systematic change. Education can enhance decision-making and solution. Next. For what concern the first categories of change, some example of individual changes can include different purchasing options, finding alternative materials to plastic, changing our littering practices and disposal like behavior. And for what concerns the systemic change, they can include collaboration and involvement of consumers with like the companies, for instance, collaboration with the waste management sector, research and development for alternative-oriented innovations, and also the implementation of policies and measures to make sure we phase out plastics, for instance, on like beach tourism sites, or like there's like an implementation of better like waste management facilities on tourism sites and so on. Next. And here I'd like to present some success stories from around the world, starting with the first one, Kalmar, Sweden. This was a project that was aiming at like engaging more like citizens in curbside collection, and how they did that using like different like color bags in order to separate different materials. So they were able to separate up to 6 different like waste types. And this ended up in like 15% reduction of mixed waste production. In the second case, we see an example from Carcas, Portugal. This project was especially focusing on education and awareness on waste prevention through like the use of like gamification and environmental campaign. And they also integrated these environmental programs at school curricula. They use an app and a score-based system to track people progress and how they would like, change their own like disposal and consumption behavior. And the results was like a 28% increase public engagement in better disposal practices. Third, we have an example from Zweliha from South Africa. This project is called Recycle Swap Shop. And for this project, children are engaged in plastic waste collection, and they would like bring the plastic items at the centers, and in change they have, they receive like some points, and with this point they can like purchase different items such as like school supplies or like food or like other personal goods. And the success rate was like for this particular like project, like 320 children that engaged in the project, and they were able to collect 2.8 tons per week of waste. And of course, this project like became pretty famous in South Africa, and many more centers were developed. Next. Then we have a project from Sardinia that engages children and tourists in education on marine pollution prevention towards a zero waste island. And they had different activities involving different like beach and water sports, such as kayak, as you can see in the image. And participants would like practice water sports and collect plastic on the way. And the success rate included 200 volunteers per day on the event day. Then we have the Zamrek project from Zanzibar, Tanzania, which is an education and awareness on like waste prevention project. They organize cleanups and community solution in order to reduce plastic waste and make sure like that plastic waste is correctly recycled, recovered and recycled on the island. And they now engage over 100 hotels, which were not previously involved in the municipal waste management infrastructure. And finally, we have Nelson Mandela Bay, South Africa, which is a project organized by Sustainable Seas Trust. They do data collection on beach litter, so it's a great example of like citizen science and engagement of volunteers to clean up the beaches. And they had a huge impact. They were able to recruit over 800 volunteers per week and collect over 300 litter bags per week. Next. Next.
Yeah, just a second. Okay.
Okay, and I'd like to conclude with some of our very own. So here there is a game that we call Beating Plastic Pollution by Plane. And this is a project that we did in 2018 in north of Italy with a school in Mantova. And in this game, like children have to learn what are the impact of plastics on the environment, and also what are correct ways to dispose of plastic. So they would like roll the dice, and depending on like the box on which they land, they would learn about like best practices. And yeah, next. Following this workshop, they did a similar one in which they received like penalty in case they would like land on a box with bad pollution practices, or they would like gain points and score and have a higher score, like if they land on like separate collection practices. Next. Finally, they also learn how to separate waste using like the separate waste system like from the province, which is like paper, plastic, aluminum and glass, organic waste and non-recyclable. So they were to separate like the waste from a like waste pile here into like the 6 different like categories. Next. And finally, with some of the items that they recovered from the previous exercise, and in particular the plastic bottles, they created a school garden. And so it was really interesting for them to see how from a piece of waste, they could like give new life and create something completely new. Next. And here you can see a similar experience that we conducted in Kenya in 2016. Where children were asked to bring to school some of their like domestic refuse, and we used those to again to like build a school garden. Next. Okay, I'll give the word to my colleague Gabriela now, and thank you so much for listening. Let me know if you have any questions about it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Carol. So now I will be presenting some of the work that we have developed in the Metabolism of Cities Living Lab. Back in 2017, we started a campaign that focused on educating underrepresented communities on the SDGs, as well as different, let's say, environmental aspects. The campaign was called the Urban Metabolism and Minority Pulse. So we developed a learner's guide, which is localizing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals through tailor-based solutions. Okay, back in 2017, we, let's say, united with a collaboration with the United Nations Environmental Program, Resilience Efficiency Branch, which they focus on also urban metabolism studies. We develop an urban metabolism policy toolkit for climate adaptation and civic engagement at the city level. We develop a step-by-step guide to data collection, sustainability indicators, and minority education. So we looked at 7 different minority groups, and we wanted to make sure that we educated them in a tailored way by understanding their needs before we would communicate with them. So here is an example of the report that we created. This is our first target. We focused on children, elderly, as you can see here, people with disabilities, students and academics, women, the LGBT community, homeless, and refugees. So we wanted to make sure that these different vulnerable communities are educated in a way that is convenient and useful for them. We have to keep in mind that lots of local governments, they have a one way of educating their citizens. As a result, it's not so efficient. So what we wanted to prove in our campaign was to understand the needs of different targets. And with that, understand how we can better accommodate and also educate them in a way that is much more useful and convenient for them. So here we developed 7 different campaigns targeting different minority groups. So with this idea about leaving no one behind. Through the process, we wanted to develop a type of toolkit considering these 6 different pillars. When communicating with different vulnerable communities, we wanted to look at different aspects. As you can see here, for pillar 1, we focused on awareness, education, and research. And we wanted to use these different aspects from linguistics, storytelling, critical thinking, visual and spatial learning, and audio techniques in order to, let's say, develop more aspects on the awareness and education section. We also wanted to consider different, let's say, technologies. So using sensorial and hybrid experience, more of on a strategic level, integrated technology and systems thinking in order to, let's say, tackle our pillar number 2, which is new infrastructure and systems thinking, mostly focusing on data. Pillar number 3 focused on the recovery, reuse, and recycling, which is the assessment for learning and self-awareness. Pillar number 4 focused on sustainable consumption and behavior, making sure that their everyday life is also impacted in a positive way by using cross-curriculum teaching. And pillar number 5, transform industrial design by developing goal setting, identifying the problem, and coming up with solutions. Pillar number 6 focuses on the depletion legislation and policy, which is more on the cooperative learning structure. So we wanted to develop a toolkit that can inform educators on how to tackle different, let's say, vulnerable groups. What we have here is our urban metabolism policy toolkit that with the 9 planetary, let's say, categories that are affected in our planet. Let's say our toolkit is composed of our vulnerable communities in the inner core of the circle. And then we have our 6 pillars, which were just mentioned previously, as a way to accommodate this urban metabolism policy toolkit. What this urban metabolism concept is to make sure that we use this concept of comparing the city to a living organism as a metaphor to create awareness about the overconsumption in cities. It's important to know the material that goes in and out of the cities to better grasp the understanding. But in doing it in a way where we focus on the vulnerable groups that are within. Here we have just some few examples from our previous campaign, how we decided to tackle pillar number 1, which is awareness and education. Through the usage of storytelling, linguistic exercises, visual and spatial learning, audio learning, scalable and replicable approaches, promoting free and equitable education, removing language barriers, outreach, social programs and campaigns. So these are all aspects that should be considered when working closely on educating different types of vulnerable groups. So what we have here, we created a creation of polar bear face masks using household recyclable material items in an elementary school in Mantova in Italy. What we see here on the right, top right, is we work with the elderly community. We wanted to educate them about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We utilize a memory game as being, let's say, a game that could be very interesting for this type of community. We also utilize a comic book, let's say education, as a way to educate children about the environmental issues that are currently happening. This particular one was called Urban Metabolism and Minority Pools, Superhero Resource Flow Squad, where we had several different superheroes that tackled different materials. And storytelling through interviews. It's very important when working with different vulnerable groups to understand what is their story, what are their concerns, and better understand how to tailor your ideas based on specific groups. The second pillar focuses on new infrastructure systems thinking and the power of data. So some examples are using adaptable technologies for all ages, also virtual augmented reality education as a way to, let's say, better understand different groups and educate them in different ways, sensorial and hybrid experience, integrated technology, strategic thinking to measure surroundings, systems thinking, using visualizations as a way to educate different types of people, use of open source data technology, making sure that the data that you provide is accessible. Also, because some people don't have access to technology, so you have to definitely make sure that the data is open source, and connect with age groups with little to no access to technology. So it's important to, when working closely with different vulnerable groups, to have a plan for those who have access to technology and those who do not. So here what we have is, on the top is a virtual reality and the SDGs. The idea is to have children, let's see, look at the world in a different way using virtual reality technologies. Also, what we have here is a conference that we held where we gathered several different students from the Politecnico de Milano in order for them to develop and showcase some of their startup technology activities and how they can localize the SDGs in their own particular perspective. And then also material flow analysis being a way to visualize data in a much more easy manner. What we have here is Hong Kong and Cape Town in South Africa, where you can showcase the consumption levels in a different way. And also strategic thinking to measure surroundings. So it's important to also have a types of roundtable and open source data available to folks. In this particular case, we interviewed the mothers of the children in this elementary school in Mantova, and we asked them about their household behaviors. The second pillar is recovery, reuse, and recycle. We work closely with, let's say, a center in Mantova with people with disabilities, several types of disabilities. So it's very important to understand the different needs of different categories of people. And so some things to consider are material assessment and visualizations, as mentioned before, promoting low carbon approaches, promote self and family awareness, promoting household awareness, promoting neighborhood and awareness and through interviews, plan community-based sustainability projects, implement community-based sustainability projects, and evaluate community-based sustainability projects as well. The pictures that you see here, we had a group of, let's say, participants who in this center with people with disabilities. We asked them which topics were most interesting and important for them. So it was quite interesting to know that, you know, the background that some of these participants had and how much knowledge they had in what was currently happening around them related to climate change. We also wanted them to understand where material comes from and the logistics of material traveling across. So we gathered material from only Italy, waste material, mostly paper and plastics. And we asked them to look at the bottles and the different waste to see where the origin of this material came from. So we can see that some of the material traveled from the south, and it went all the way into Milan. So this is a way for, let's say, participants to better understand how the movement of material flows and how that impacts the environment. We also had masks that were created from recyclable materials. And so we work with different types of people with different levels of different disabilities. So this is quite an interesting experience. Here, pillar number 4 is sustainable consumption and behaviors. So it's important to make sure that when you develop your projects, you keep in mind on how to, let's say, better educate different types of people on how for them to improve their behaviors. Some examples could be influence consumption behaviors to all age groups. So considering different types of needs, cross-curricular teaching, and also considering the different types of wording and what that may represent to different groups. Monitor personal consumption behaviors, basic principles of sustainable planning, basic principles of sustainable building, identify opportunities and barriers, making their own area more sustainable, how that can be possible, and making their own area more inclusive. It's very important now that we live in a world where diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important. What we had here is we interviewed several different students from the Politecnico de Milano, where we asked them where they were from, and they demonstrated the most important alarming issues within their own individual city. We had people here from Argentina, from Italy, from North of Africa, Algeria, from France, and different areas of Italy as well, from the north, the center, and the south. We had colleagues from Bolivia, we had from India, and we also wanted to create awareness about the different behaviors, sustainable behaviors. So we developed an exhibition at the Politecnico de Milano, also conferences about the importance, and we went around the city center of Milan, Italy, and we interviewed different people. We asked them what were their most important, let's say, issues within their own individual cities. We interviewed different faculty members as well as students. And we wanted to really understand, as students, as professionals, as citizens, what are they doing in order to tackle the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and also the issues in their own individual cities. And pillar number 5 is transform industrial design. It's important to consider that not only citizens are responsible for sustainable actions within the city, but also their government and the way that their cities are planned. So compare and assess different business models could definitely be a way to tackle this issue. Identify reliable short-term and long-term policies. Identify sustainable problems. Solving skills through training, identify cradle to grave designs, identify cleaner production policies, and conscious producer responsibility policies. Set goals based on different target scenarios. So through environment conscious producer towards optimization and responsibility would be definitely something to consider for your projects. And last but not least is pillar number 6 is depletion legislation and policies. So some examples are identify land use, zoning, and codes in vulnerable hotspot areas to better understand the case study area that you're looking at and what are some of those impacts on also the people and their relationship to the land use. Understanding how policies can influence production. Understanding how policies can influence supply and demand, the movement of materials, especially in the case of El Astillero being a coastal city. Monitor usage of material and non-material and legislation. Use of cooperative learning structures, incentives, subsidies, and grants. Evaluate and compare the sustainability of specific settlement systems. And assess food, energy, transport, resources, water, safety, and waste through the usage of different aspects like material flow, in visualizing the movement of material within a specific flow or even a sector or a region, and integrate inclusion and accessibility education, green spaces, and disaster risk reductions. This is just a snapshot of the lab that we're currently working at San Diego State University. We aim to focus on vulnerable, let's say, communities in Southern California, in Baja California, Mexico region. So we try to work closely with multi-actor partnerships with universities, cities, individuals, organizations, mostly focusing on underrepresented communities and tackling the UN SDGs. And if you see here closely, you can see that the SDGs are developed in different languages, also for, let's say, for people with that might be blind. So the idea is that no one should be left behind. So in this particular lab, we're focusing on developing practical solutions that consider all. So in summary, it's important to engage all citizens by tailoring education policies to suit their needs. So understanding the differences of different targets, different people, in different age groups. Engage universities and community stakeholders as knowledge center hubs. So we're using like urban walk audits, campaigns, and educating minorities in different languages as being an example. And educate and engage cities, government officials, students, and academics. For example, universities, research institutions, including primary and secondary schools, outdoor education groups, such environmental associations, the general public and companies on current climate change and sustainable development policy agendas. Engage targets through social media, culture, art, and community activities and services using tailor-method solutions. So understanding your population is very important. Who is your audience? Direct governments towards an inclusive and socially justice city environment. Connect local stakeholder groups, synergies, and create strong local-based networks. This is a way to better understand if your idea will be accepted within this environment, and create scalable and replicable methodology tailored solutions that suit the needs of all members of society, because in the end, no one should be left behind. And that concludes my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions concerning our presentation, but thank you very much for your, there you go, for your time. Domenico, if you would like to take over.
Yes, surely. First of all, thank you very much to Carol and Gabriela for the amazing presentation. Maybe we can have a little bit space for questions if there are, or comments and so on. And then the schedule will provide the breakout rooms, but I will now explain how the process works. But first of all, questions if there are for our speakers. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll briefly remind which is our mission in this Climathon. So basically, I will share my screen showing the website of the Climathon. And the goal is to provide solution, and is like a challenge of ideas. And we want to provide solution for the LACero case. So the title is From Trash to Treasure, because the solution need to be addressed on how to recycle and how to give a new life to the trash collected by LACero Shore. We are working on 5 challenges, so 5 thematic areas in which we want to develop solutions. So data and monitoring, education, arts and humanities, industries, and technology and industry and tourism. You can see them in detail on our website. Now I'll share also the link into the chat. And also, join the WhatsApp chat. Dr. Gabriela Fernandez has shared the link as well as the Discord channel. And the idea is to work together in teams to develop solutions. And properly now is the moment on dividing ourselves in the teams. Each team will address one challenge and is committed to work to a solution. Today in the opening, we have presented our advisors. So each team has an advisor. So one of us of the organizing team that is kind of following and helping you to facilitate you to find solutions and so on. Yes, thank you. And you can see in the chat who are the advisor for each challenge. And now we are gonna open some breakout rooms in which with your advisor you can discuss and think about how to foster the solution and how to develop solutions. So I think that we can proceed like this. Now I will open the breakout room. I saw that some from the team of education are here in the call. So take the chance to match with Sebastiano, that will be your advisor.
Hello?
Yeah, tell me. Hi. Who's speaking?
No, it was me. I just said hello. I'm Sebastiano.
Okay, sorry. Oh, here is Sebastiano. And for the other teams, let's use maybe this time to call up our fellows, our teammates, in order to let them join the channels and so on. So I will start the breakout room now. Just one last information. After this call will be other checkpoints. So for the ones that are joining just now, see the recording and see the participant pack that I kindly asked to Carlo or Gabriela to share in the chat, so you can understand what I'm talking about, these terms like participant pack, checkpoints, and so on. By the way, there will be also some other appointments and seminars like these ones to help you to foster the solution. And the next one will be your thematic workshop. So each team will encounter an expert in the field in one of these challenges that showcase your some case studies and solution. You will receive the calendar invite, so check that. By the way, now let's launch the breakout rooms and let's proceed as I said. So please, Dr. Sujit, I saw here, and Teniwa, you are on the education side, and also I think Jonathan is in the education side. So let's meet Sebastiano in the breakout room of education. For the others, let's call up our colleagues for finding a solution.